Welcome to the Red Hot Reds podcast presented by Ohio Sports Talk. This podcast is for Reds fans, by Reds fans. We're going to talk today about relief pitchers. They've been up and down this season. Had, some all-stars in the past of this team. Can we have success with our bullpen this year, Ricky?
I think we can.
All right, let's start the show.
Let's go.
This is the Red Hot Reds podcast. Here are your hosts, Ricky Logan and Roger Straz.
Welcome to the show. This is episode 5, relief pitchers. We're going to be talking about some of the guys that hold it down in the back end of the bullpen and whatnot. We're thankful again to Jordan and Doug of Ohio Sports Talk for lending us this platform. Please subscribe on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. We're also for podcast form on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find us. Ricky this time is going to have the Scoreboard Stumper to try to test my knowledge. And, I hopefully got my brain on for this, Ricky. I'm not so sure. Hopefully you give me some hints, if anything.
All right. So this week's Scoreboard Stumper is, who are the Reds' top 5 save leaders in a single season?
Yeah, I got some thoughts because I know recently he went into the Reds Hall of Fame. I think an all-time saves leader just overall is Danny Graves. I think
That's one.
That's one. Another guy that we've talked about in the past and talked about before the show, that's a probably future Reds Hall of Famer is Chapman.
No, he is actually 7th.
Oh, so he's out of the top 5. Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay. Another guy that I had on my radar was Arthur Rhodes. Is he top 5?
No, he never cracked the top 24.
Diaz, he's not a top 5 already. He's only had 3 full seasons. Is he top 5? Alexis Diaz?
He's top 10.
Oh, all right. Probably.
I guess if you want to count Chapman, we can count Chapman because one of these guys did it twice.
Okay. Any hints?
I'll give you a hint. Joey Votto MVP season.
2010. Francisco Cordero?
Yes, he did it twice.
So he's on there. So there's three of the 5 is what you're saying?
Well, we'll count him, I guess, once as an individual player. So we'll count Chapman as one.
Okay. So we got 2 more guys, is what you're saying?
We got Chapman, Graves, and Cordero.
Oh, shoot.
You want another hint?
Yeah.
Reds are on the radio.
Oh, the Cowboy? Jeff Brantley?
Yes, he is number 1.
No way. I know he had some good season for the Reds, and he's a Reds legend.
He had 44 in 1996.
You know what? That he was a Rolaids relief man in 96, right? I think so. They need to bring that back, just an aside. Rolaids relief man.
I think he's the only Red to ever win that award.
Probably, yeah. It had a short run in the 90s, 2000s. It was kind of a thing. I mean, the branding, Rolaids relief. Anyway. So one more guy.
No. Yeah. This one's going to be kind of hard. I'll give you another hint. It's 1997. And he only pitched for the Reds for 2 years.
I think Graves is around that time, but obviously we got Graves already. 97. I can't think of a guy other than Danny Graves, but we already got him. So who did it in 97?
Jeff Shaw.
Oh, yeah, I was not going to get that one. That's good.
He had, let's see. Notes went away. he had, I think it was 42, I think.
That's pretty good. That's a good year. But he was only with the Reds 2 seasons, you said?
Yeah. So in his one of his two, he had 42 saves in 1997.
Yeah, you got me. That was a good one. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, in exact order, it would be Brantley, Shaw, Graves, Cordero, and then Cordero's tied with John Franco. So I guess you could kind of count that. And that was in 1988, and then Chapman in 2013.
Yeah, I forgot about John Franco. He pitched for the Reds.
But yeah. So speaking of bullpen and closers, we have a closer of our own who had a pretty good year in 2023 and low key kind of struggled, but his numbers don't really show that he struggled. But his losses came in non-save situations. Alexis Diaz, can he get back to where he was in 2023?
Yeah, certainly hope so for the bullpen. 2023, he was an all-star, and deservedly so. He's one of the best arms, I think, in the NL that year, that first half of the year for sure. Yeah, the weird thing also like about 2024 is that he had a really much bigger ERA than 2023, but didn't have the blown saves. Like you said, like a lot of his stuff happened in non-save situations, and hopefully the situations that happened in 2025 are going to be mostly, save situations where he gets it done. I feel like there was games in 2024 as well where he would come in for a save situation, give up a walk, give up a home run, but still like get the save at the end. It kind of felt like he was effectively wild. Like he got the job done in the end, but it wasn't without a bunch of tension, a bunch of like a bunch of people just gripping their seats, like, oh goodness, we're not gonna blow this one. I mean, because there was a stretch where he was not blowing saves at all in 2024, but the Reds were not. I mean, they weren't leading the division. They weren't top of the heap for that. And in 2025, we like to think that he can get back to that, but there has been some concerning stats with his fastball kind of losing velocity over time. And he's age 27 right now, season coming. So we'd like to think that he's going to kind of put it back together in 2025. But I don't know. That we'll talk about the offseason additions and whatnot. I like to think that he's going to be our closer from game 1 to game 162 and hopefully leading us into the playoffs. But I don't know. Alexis Diaz is a little bit of a question mark going into this season. His spring training's been good, but what do you see out of Alexis Diaz in 2025?
Yeah, I mean he really relies on his slider. If he's not locating his fastball, then he really gets into trouble because guys aren't going to chase the slider if his fastball is not hitting the zone. In 2023, he had a batting average against of 239 on his fastball and 154 on his slider. And in 2024, it was the opposite. He had a 214 batting average on his slider and 196 on his fastball. So his slider was kind of being timed up a little bit more because they were waiting on it because his fastball wasn't as consistent in the strike zone. But I do like Diaz. I think confidence is his biggest thing. And if he can get his fastball where it needs to go, I mean, he could be up there, top 7 closer in the game. But he was an all-star in 2023 for a reason. And I'd like to hope that he can get back to that. He's still young. 27's not aging. And, fastball velocity, if you're, taking care of yourself, it can stay up there till you're, I mean, Verlander's still throwing mid-90s, and he's, 42? So I'd like to think if he can, stay healthy, I think he can get back to where he was.
Yeah, for sure. And just looking at the WAR numbers in 2020 or 2022, where he came out as a rookie and finished 5th in the Rookie of the Year voting. 2022, he had a 2.9 WAR. He had 7-3 record, 1.84 ERA. The next year, 9-6 record, 3.07 ERA in 51 games, and this past season, 2-5 and 3.99 ERA. So it's kind of trending in the wrong direction. We like to think he can turn it around and have a nice 2025 season, especially for a Reds team that at least both of us think that will be in contention throughout the year. We definitely don't want to have a situation. I mean, just inside of our own division, the Cubs had a great team, bunch of offensive players, bunch of good starting pitching, but had a bunch of blown saves and were out of it and lost the division by 10 games to the Brewers. So we definitely don't want that scenario to happen to the Reds because the margin of error for the Reds is already pretty small. You don't want to, exacerbate it with a bad end of the back end of the bullpen. So I think Diaz is hopefully going to accept that responsibility, going to realize that he's the guy and hopefully get the job done on the back end. He had, 37 saves in 2023, 28 only last year. So if he's in a situation where he's at 35 plus saves, the Reds are obviously playing winning baseball if he's getting that many saves. And if his ERA is closer to 3 than it is 4, then we're talking about another possible all-star appearance for him again in 2025, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I keep harping on it, but I think a manager like Terry Francona really, being a player's manager, but really pushing to get the best out of his players. I think him being that leader in the clubhouse will make a huge difference for Diaz. Now, we did make some additions in the offseason as far as the bullpen goes. We traded for a guy and we signed a guy. We got Taylor Rogers from the Giants, and we signed Scott Barlow. So how are you feeling about Taylor Rogers, and what do you expect out of him in 2025 for the Reds?
Yeah, I love both additions overall. The Rogers one, he was on $12 million a year, and then the trade they got the Giants to pay for half his salary. So in a very small market Reds move, they have a $12 million reliever, a left-hander out of the bullpen that's only on $6 million on their books. So for me, I like that, at least from a Brad Meter, Nick Kroll standpoint, where they're getting a guy that in my opinion, I think is going to be the first lefty out of the bullpen before Sam Moll, even though Moll had a pretty decent year last year for the Reds, and they got him in a trade in 2023, I believe, from the Athletics. So yeah. I feel like Rogers could be the guy that's going to be first lefty out of the bullpen when they need him. They have for Fangraphs not necessarily great numbers for Rogers. He's 3-3 in 55 games, predicted in 4.6 ERA. I like to hope that he's going to be a little bit better than those numbers. But we'll talk about this probably throughout this episode. Is that bullpen can be very up and down, and guys can have individually up and down seasons from year to year or just within the same season. It's very difficult to be consistent as a reliever year on year. But for him, I think coming out and coming from the Giants organization, which is a generally pretty good organization, I think he'll provide some good innings out of the bullpen for the Reds. How do you see these two additions right now?
Yeah, I like Rogers a lot. He's a 2-pitch pitcher. He uses a sinker and a sweeper, so he has a really high ground ball rate. So I think that playing in Great American is huge. He could low key be he could be the first lefty out, or he could be that lefty that really shut down and prepare for Diaz. Yeah, he's a really reliable guy too, and Barlow is equally as a ground ball pitcher. He's 47% ground ball rate, and he's a 5.8% barrel rate. So guys just don't time up his pitches at all, and he relies on his slider. He throws it about 45% of the time, and then his curveball is a secondary pitch. So that really gets to ground balls. His ERA was up a little bit in 24, but his career ERA is only 3.49. So I really like these two guys a lot. And I think Barlow in 2022 for the Royals had 20-something saves. And he could maybe fight Diaz for that closer role. What do you think if Diaz is to struggle? What do you think about Barlow potentially being a closer?
Yeah, I think you touched on it a little bit with Francona. I think Barlow was most recently with Cleveland last season or the season before. But I think that no nonsense out of Francona is if Diaz is coming out the gate struggling, his velocity, his fastball, the setup, his other pitches is not there. Yeah, I can possibly see Barlow stealing some saves from him if that's the scenario. I don't want necessarily that to be the case. It'd be great if they have a setup man like Scoreboard to set up Alexis Diaz for the ninth, but he's got the experience. He's got the numbers behind it to back up that he can get the job done. Fangraphs as well has him as like a 3.55 ERA in 61 predicted games. So I think he's going to be a big part of this team, and I think it's going to be key that he's getting those outs for the Reds, whether it's as a setup man or as the closer. I think it's a good insurance policy that the Reds kind of do. I think, they love those guys that can be platoon players or versatile, so they don't have situations where if someone goes down to injury, they don't have someone to fill that spot. I think if there is struggles or issues with Diaz and whatever it may come, they have that kind of insurance policy of Barlow with that experience to close down games if need be. Ideal situation, we want him to do that? No, not necessarily. Diaz is our guy, is brought up by the Reds. He's an all-star. I'd love to see him repeat in 2025 as an all-star for the Reds, and hopefully, the Reds will have 3 or 4 or 5 guys representing them in the Midsummer Classic. But, things happen in baseball. It's not guaranteed that guys' spots they're going to be their spots. But if you have Barlow waiting in the wings and he can get the job done, that's just another, credit to Meter and Crawl for having that foresight or having that ability to have that flexibility within the 26-man roster or the 40-man roster, whoever you got there to be the next man up. So how do you see Barlow in his role this year?
Yeah, I think you basically said what I was going to say. I think he could be that setup man, and if Diaz was to struggle, I think he could fill in. Maybe not a full-time closer, but at least maybe fill in to give Diaz a break. Or if he was to get hurt, knock on wood, I think he could be a good option to be the closer. Now, the Reds announced their starting rotation. We touched on it on the last episode. They seem to be leaning towards Graham Ashcraft being in the bullpen. How do you feel about him, and where do you expect him to be starting in 2025?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with the Fangraphs as them all as Graham in the bullpen as well, and Abbott being the 5th guy. I tend to agree with that. Today, he didn't have necessarily the best outing, is starting in a split squad game for the Reds against, I think, the White Sox. And, it's spring training, so you don't put, too much stock into it, but he did give up a home run today and kind of struggled because the spring training rules, if you exit the first inning, you can re-enter the second. But he still didn't look like he had his best stuff today, and that's unfortunate because we talked a lot about him last episode, and we're really trying to pull for him because he's kind of got that bulldog in him. They got that energy that you'd love to see on the mound, and I think that possibly if he's willing to accept a role in the bullpen and be a guy that's either the long reliever or a setup guy or a guy that just got to eat innings in certain situations, really think that hopefully he can accept that and embrace that role and be the guy for that. The Fangraphs also kind of predict him to have that kind of level of innings this year. I think he's only got maybe 100 innings predicted to be that. So he's kind of got that, in between role where he's not a starter, not a reliever, but he'll be kind of somewhere in between that. There may be situations where he has to be that fifth starter, or if guys are, needing a rest in the rotation, he can step up and be that guy and give them 5 or 6, maybe 7 innings if he can get that deep. But yeah, I really see him in the bullpen this year. How do you see Graham Ashcraft for the Reds?
Yeah, I think he's gonna accept the role of the bullpen. I think he's an easy guy to root for. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's such an emotional guy, and when he's on, he's on. It's just the lows for him are extremely low. I think we talked about it last episode, but last year or in 2023, when his grandmother passed away, the next month he had an ERA over 10, and then the following month had an ERA over 9. But then he cut it down to 1.9 the month after. So he's such an up and down guy, but he's such an easy guy to root for. So far in spring training, he's pitched in 5 games. He's 0-3 with a 6.75 ERA in 13 innings. But he does have 13 strikeouts, so he's averaging a strikeout an inning. It's just, he's just getting into trouble, giving up runs. And I think he's a guy that I would like to see in a high leverage situation, just because when he's emotional and he's on, he could be a really dominant reliever. It's just, I would like to see more short burst out of him, just because, he might have a good 2 innings in a row, but then he could really crash and burn after that 3rd inning. And I'd like to see him, if we could get him down to 1 to 2 innings pitched and an outing, I think that'd be more ideal.
Yeah, for sure. I think having that heart in your sleeve type of mentality can probably, wear you out as a starter. He definitely seems to kind of, he may even have future closer type mentality with the way he kind of goes about his business. It may be in his future. Not saying 2025 that's going to be the year, but if he does show some success as a reliever in whatever capacity they throw him into, you never know. He could be a closer down the road for the Reds or for whoever. I think he's got some good stuff. He seems to have some struggles in the past of his grandma passing away that may have affected him, may not. Hopefully 2025 will be a good showing for him to really show what he's got, because he's he was kind of one of those guys that in 2023 would take the ball every 5 starts and give his all one way or another. 2024, like a lot of guys, took a step back, really struggled, and hopefully 2025 again will be a good year for him.
Yeah, for sure. Now, kind of speaking on the long relief aspect with Ashcraft, is this the year we can get rid of the openers?
Please. Please. Yeah, man. Okay, so the openers, for anybody that's maybe unfamiliar, maybe just, casual baseball, they got starters, and the conventional starter sense, you have guys that will take the ball every 5th day and will throw for 5, 6, 7. Way back in the old days, complete games were more common than not. But in modern baseball, 27 outs is the goal for every single franchise to get out there. And there's been the analytics that have crept into the game where it ends up being a situation where it's difficult to get those 27 outs. And starters have struggled with getting through the 3rd time of a lineup. So what I think was kind of a way to kind of not necessarily fix that problem, but to kind of get through a lineup in the 1st inning is you'd have a guy that would get the first 3 outs. And I think the Tampa Bay Rays were kind of the inventors, or the guys that first kind of started doing the opener phenomenon for lack of a better word. And they would get those first 3 outs, and then the conventional starter would get the second inning, third, fourth, maybe get into the 6th or 7th. So you got a situation where you're kind of bridging to that 7th, 8th, 9, setup men and closers. And the Rays, as a kind of small market team and kind of a darling that, they try to win in the margins, it worked for them for a while. I think the reason why I'm kind of launching into this semi-tirade is that the Reds last year used openers, but it wasn't because they felt like they were trying to get those 27 outs in whatever way possible. It's getting those first 3 outs. Tony Santillan started, Jacob Junis started, as openers, Buck Farmer. But like they were using openers because they just didn't have guys to be everyday starters, to be, guys that are in the rotation. So I feel like for me, please do not use openers, Terry Francona, unless it's like the last option possible. Now, I know that's like asking a lot for a lot of guys that, maybe need that extra day of rest, Green or, Lodolo or Martinez or, Singer for that matter, or even Abbott. Abbott might need an extra day of rest, that they might need to go to that type of strategy. But to me, like, it felt like going to the game, and there was a lot of times in 2024 where the Reds were like, usually when you get like the MLB app or you go on, MLB website or whatever, the Reds website, you see the starters listed right the day before. The Reds were doing this in August and September where it was like so-and-so versus pitcher to be named. Like it would just be NA. Not anybody named. Like I remember going to a game, I think maybe in like late July, and it was like no starter was named until like an hour or 30 minutes before the game started. And it's like, obviously there's going to be fans that come to the game no matter who's pitching, but sometimes it's good to know who's the guy that's taking the ball, who's going to be throwing, hopefully, late into the game and hopefully having a dominant start. But I don't know. This is probably small market problems, quote unquote, like having not enough arms to fill out the 162 games. I really hope that the Reds' philosophy, getting Singer, getting a bunch of, guys like Louder and Burns in the draft, like I want to see starters 162 games every year. Now, are they going to go possibly 8 innings, 9 innings? No. Sometimes they'll be like 4 innings, 5 innings if they're really struggling and they need to get pulled. Fine. That's why we got long relievers like Ashcraft, and if Martinez goes back to that role, he'll be the long reliever or what have you. But please, let's just, if we can, like, no openers.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the only use case for an opener, like you said, is if a guy needs a day off. But if we're going to use it, I would hope for no more than 1 a month. I think a guy like Ashcraft could be an opener if you're going to use him for 2 innings. But Studer last year was used as an opener a few times, and I think he did pretty well. There was a game in April where Frankie Montas was a starter, and he got hit in the elbow. And he had to exit the game, and they brought in Studer, and I think he went 3 innings scoreless. So he was pretty well. Is there any pitchers you would like to see as an opener? Like I think the two that I think of the most, because we don't have Jacob Junis anymore. He's no longer on the team. I think if any of the young pitchers were to come up, I think Martinez could be used in that role also, if he was to move back to the bullpen, because he is so flexible. Do you have a guy you would like to see as like a dedicated opener?
Not necessarily. In an ideal world, yeah, I forgot about Studer. Studer had a pretty good run as an opener, but and like I said, I feel like it's a lack of depth problem for the Reds is what it ended up being, which is why I guess I'm kind of staunchly against it. For situations where guys need rest, like Abbott or whomever it may be in late July, August, September. Yeah, I'm not gonna not support the Reds at that point. But I want it to not be. I felt like it was a situation where like 3 out of the 7 days of the week it was openers, and it just was like last minute because we're just scrambling, and that doesn't like express to the fans much confidence that we're going to be contention in 2024, especially. But like going to next year, like if that's going to be kind of a strategy that they're going to go to more than once a month, like you were saying, like if they're going to that frequently, it shows that the depth of this team is not great, and we need possibly to build up those arms. Which like we were talking about the starting pitchers before, I feel like we're in a good spot to have guys waiting in the wings. Louder hopefully be waiting in the wings. Burns waiting in the wings. Petty waiting in the wings. If there is going to be a guy that really shines as an opener, actually is a guy that we haven't even talked about yet, is Tony Santillan. He has, and I saw a piece by Charlie Goldsmith about him. He came up in 2022 and had a great start to his Reds career, and he's still young. He's only in like his age 28 season going into this year. He had a great 2022 season, kind of had some injuries throughout the last couple of years, and waited his turn in 2024 in AAA and got called up in July. Got some opener starts for the Reds at that point, but he shined pretty well in those spots. So I guess if anything, if you really press me on who would you like to see as a dedicated opener, I wouldn't mind seeing Tony. He's come a long way. He's a Reds guy through and through, and I think that would be my pick if I had to pick one.
Yeah, Tony, last year he was in 29 games. He went 3-3 with a 3.0 ERA in 30 innings and had 46 strikeouts with a 1.00 whip. And he's got electric stuff, like very underrated. When you see him, he's 6'3", 285. He's a pretty big guy, but he's got that very electric fastball. And I think he's got that good breaking ball that can really throw guys off too. I like Tony Santillan to be a good opener if that was to be the case. I think the opener issue was really a David Bell issue. I think, I think he didn't want to really push the starters like Green or even Martinez later in the season. I mean, like Martinez was the only pitcher to have a complete game, and that was, I think, his final start of the season. So I think I saw an interview with Francona not that long ago where he's talking about pitchers, and he was talking about who's their pitch coach?
Freddie Benavides.
No, it was the recent one that just signed with Francona.
Oh,
Brad Mills.
Okay.
Mills. And he was talking with him about there's a guy in the 7th inning, third time through the lineup, and he walks 2 guys, but he's still doing well. They're up, let's say 3-0, and he goes, "Should we take him out?" And he goes, "No." He's like, he's got his stuff, and I'm going to rely on him. So I think I keep talking about Francona, but he's the manager that's going to get the best out of your guys, and he knows when to push and when to pull. So I think he might not utilize an opener as much as David Bell did. And with openers too, like it could really affect the reliever's confidence if he struggles in one outing as an opener, because it's a totally different situation. When you're an opener, you're starting the game, and as opposed to coming in like the 7th inning or the 6th inning, like it's totally different warm up. And if they have one bad outing, it could ruin their confidence for the next 3 or 4 outings too. So with that, who do you have as your bullpen for 2025?
Yeah, I think it's pretty well set as far as, I don't know. things could change from now until opening day, but we've got some established guys. I think, at least philosophically, it seems like the Reds will draft and try to develop starters, but they have been going the route of getting established guys like Mole, Rogers, Barlow, Suter from like deals and either free agency or trades. So I feel like that philosophy it's not too bad a one, because I think we talked about before recording. It's like relief pitching can be up and down from year to year. It's very difficult to be year on year excellent at relief pitching. So there's going to be situations where we got a guy like Ian Jabot who in 2023 pitched 71 games, right? And then 2024 just was gassed out and was injured the whole year and didn't pitch at all for the big league club. So and he'll be back in 2025, but I don't necessarily see him on the 26-man roster right now. So to run through that just quickly, I think we got Ashcraft in the bullpen with Scott Barlow, Brent Suter, Tony Santillan, as we mentioned a little bit of Mole. And Mole's been kind of quiet, good. I think he's been a solid pickup from the 2023 trade deadline. You know what I mean? Like, there's not been really a lot of negative stuff out of him. I would say he's been a solid reliever for them, and I expect that hopefully in 2025 as well. Emilio Pagan as well. I think they got him in free agency before the 23 season or 24 season. I can't remember now.
Yeah, it was at the free agency last season.
And then Rogers and Diaz to round it out the relievers for that. So that's how there may be, if there's injuries, you can see maybe possibly a Carson Spires in there as a possible fifth guy, long reliever, but I think he'll possibly start in AAA if all these guys are healthy and ready to go. How do you see the bullpen right now for the Reds?
Yeah, I'm looking at a piece by Mark Sheldon, and he has Diaz as the closer, and then Emilio Pagan, Sam Mole, Brent Suter, Taylor Rogers, Scott Barlow, Tony Santillan, and Graham Ashcraft. I think the only one I worry about, and I keep talking about him, is Graham Ashcraft, just because I think he has options. So he could maybe get his feet wet as a reliever in AAA.
Yeah.
And maybe you would bring up Carson Spires, because Carson Spires was actually really good last year until he gassed out. Because, he was pitching well. I think he had a couple shutouts through like 6 innings or 5 innings. And he was low-key like a really good fill-in starter for a short time, I think, while Lodolo was hurt.
Yeah.
So I would maybe swap out Spires and Ashcraft, and I kind of like how our bullpen's looking.
Yeah, it's I think it's got in mind bridging the gap from the starters to Diaz. I think that's the philosophy, the thought process behind all the guys they've added through the last couple of years and the guys added this off season. I don't think they're like the most dominant bullpen in the NL, or even the NL Central, but they're going to be serviceable guys, veteran guys that have been there and done that. You know what I mean? None of these guys are, there's a bunch of guys here with a lot of service time. Suter's got 7 years of service time. Barlow's got 6 years of service time. Taylor Rogers got 8 years of service time. Like, these guys are veterans. They know their bodies. They know what limits they can hit. It's just a matter of getting those outs, getting those 27 outs or whatever outs, the 3 outs they need to get that inning to move the game along. It might be an underrated part of this roster, the bullpen. But like I was talking about earlier, they could have a really difficult season. A lot of these guys could have possibly a really difficult season, and it's difficult because you only get certain opportunities to get in the game, right? So, they have to make the most of their opportunities when they get called upon, and hopefully they'll do the job for the Reds in 2025. Is there any other thoughts you got on this part of the roster at this point?
No, there was one that I wanted to bring up for you. The floor is yours. Buck Farmer. The loss of Buck Farmer. Roger, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Buck Farmer is a guy that pitched in 61 games last year at a 1.7 WAR, which was top among relievers, even better than our 2023 All-Star Alexis Diaz, who was only 0.5 WAR and those 28 saves. Buck Farmer was used in some real low leverage situations, I feel, throughout the season, where he's just getting through a game where the Reds were out of it, or maybe they were ahead by a lot. So I guess what Mr. Ricky Logan's referring to in terms of seeding the floor is that, thank you for your service, Mr. Farmer. We had some good times. You had some good, appearances, but I don't think you'll be too missed. You're off to Atlanta, greener pastures possibly, because they're going to be a perennial contender in the NL East. And, it would be good to see him when the Braves play the Reds in the beginning of August and for the Bristol Raceway showcase game. But I don't think it'll be very missed. We appreciate all the good times that you had for us, and we hope that you have more success in your next team. But with relief pitching, it's dime a dozen, I feel. The Reds gave him a nice, decent, I think, $1.5 million before the 2024 season. And I think he earned it. I'm not bitter at all about him leaving. I'm not saying that he should have done more for the Reds organization. It's just, unfortunately, the way the business works is that, there's a lot of guys that can do the relief pitching job. There's a lot of specialists out there, nowadays in the relief corps that I don't think he'll be very missed, but we thank you for your service, Mr. Buck Farmer.
Yeah, in spring training so far, he's pitched in 5 games. He has a 6.35 ERA in 5 2/3 innings with a WHIP of 2.12. 2024, he was 3-2 with a 3.04 ERA. He was in 61 games with 70 strikeouts. So he was pretty well last year. He's 34, so he's kind of getting up there to where we have younger options for the bullpen. So, like you said, thank you for your service, and good luck when you win a World Series with Atlanta.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Usually, I think he's got those spring training numbers that are like, Usually, pitching travels better, even though Atlanta is not that much further north. But he'll definitely have a lot more run support by the big league club than the spring training guys they're throwing out there. So I don't put much stock that he's going to have a bad year because he's stinking it up. And is Atlanta? Did they play in Florida, or I'm guessing Florida? That's closer to them.
I think so. Yeah.
But I was trying to look up if he got some decent money from being a free agent for Atlanta, but I couldn't find it in time. Oh,
I think it was a minor league deal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, this is okay. So I think we talked about it a little bit before we started taping. It feels like, to be a crude comparison, that relief pitching is kind of like the running backs of the NFL. They're very replaceable. Yeah. They're very kind of up and down. Guys could have good years. Guys could have bad years. You get injured, your whole year's kind of screwed, kind of thing. But they're usually generally cheap, and you can replace them with younger and harder throwing talent. So, like, Farmer had a good year in probably the 90s and the 2000s. If he had that kind of relief pitching year in 2024, he probably doesn't get a minor league contract the next year. He probably, even though he's 34, probably gets a $2 million, $3 million deal, in a more just world. But unfortunately, he's a relief pitcher, and we definitely value relief pitching here in Cincinnati because we traded for Rogers. We got a couple guys in the off season that hopefully will do the job for us. And I guess the takeaway that I'd like to think is that a $12 million relief pitcher and Taylor Rogers, I'm hoping he lives up to that. I know we're only paying $6 million of that 12, but I like to think that them getting the Reds organization getting him is that he's going to be a big part of their plans, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Whether he lives up to it, I guess we'll see. You're right, but he definitely is a guy that we'll hopefully see a lot of in big spots, high leverage spots, like you talk about, and hopefully he gets the job done for us because last year we didn't have a lot of success in one-run games. So 2025 is the bounce back year from that statistical anomaly, and hopefully we'll be closing down those one-run games with some solid relief pitching.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to ask you a couple things. We didn't talk about this pre-show, but it was just recently announced today that Tyler Stevenson's going to start the season on the IL.
Yeah.
And it looked like Trevino got taken out of the game. I think he got hit in the hand. So are we worried about the injury bug again this year? And who's going to catch for us? Because it's looking like Austin Wynns is going to be that guy. They have been using another catcher in their split squad games. It's find it real quick. It is Banfield.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know much about him. I do know a little bit about Austin Wynns. He caught some last year.
Yeah.
Now it was said that Stevenson's injury was a strained oblique, so it might not be too dire. It might just be that 10-game IL and then come back. Let's hope that's what it is, and let's just hope that Trevino's just got a little bruise on his hand from getting hit. I hope it's not a fracture or anything. I don't think they've released any statements as of yet. So, what are your thoughts on the injury situation at catcher?
Not ideal, especially coming off the great year that Tyler Stevenson had last year, especially defensively. Like, he had a really good improvement in that area. His bat is valuable. There was some stat that I saw out there that they were 68 and something with him, but like 9 and 32 without him.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly if that was like all him making the differences. He was one of the positive WAR guys in 2024, but there was a lot of guys that were average to below average on that 2024 team. So I don't necessarily attribute all the success to Stevenson. He obviously adds value when he's in the lineup, and there was a lot of complaints last year that he wasn't playing enough because he wasn't catching that 130, 140 games. But even when he wasn't catching, he wasn't in the lineup either. So there's kind of this push and pull of like, I don't know exactly the limits of his body at this point, but maybe at this point it might be. Hopefully, if it's not a nagging situation, hopefully it's just a 10-day injury list stint, and he can come back after that and ramp back up, in April to May. Like, it's not the worst case scenario. I kind of hit on it that, it's great to be named opening day 26-man roster, right? A guy like Luke Mailey 2 years ago was, a Covington kid that got to be announced by Joe Zerhausen to run onto the field and, wave at everybody and have his family in the stands and feel that civic pride, that city pride of being a Cincinnati Red that he, had aspired to be his whole life. It's nice to do that, but not necessarily, if you're on the open day roster, that means you're going to be guaranteed to play all 162, right? So, like, hopefully this is just a small blip on the Stevenson season of 2025, and we can get him back as soon as possible. The Trevino one is interesting. I didn't see any reports about him getting hit in the hand or what has come of it. We're hoping it's not necessarily that situation that we had in 2024 where guys getting hit in the hand constantly for the Reds, and it ended up being kind of a small epidemic of what is going on here type situation. And I think you made the prediction a couple episodes ago that Trevino was going to be that starting catcher potentially because he's a better defensive catcher, and he might be the more trusted catcher for Hunter Green.
Yeah.
Those plans might be, that they might be a wrench in those plans if he's hitting the hand and has to go get some x-rays on that. Hopefully nothing of the sort will come back negative, or hopefully it all comes back negative and nothing, is broken or nothing's hurt. It's good to have Austin Wynns, who has a little bit of that experience. To be honest, to throw this out there, I don't know exactly where he is in the Kansas City depth chart, but maybe there's a situation where we bring back old Luke Maley just to have a little bit more depth and some knowledge of this pitching staff. I know that's kind of out there. I'm not necessarily sure if that's even a possibility, but I say why not? Like I say, he's a local kid. It wouldn't be the first time that he's gone from team to team to team, but he definitely has familiarity with this starting rotation, and if need be, like this is probably worst case scenario, right? Like Stevenson's out for a while, Trevino's out for a while, Austin Wynns, hopefully can do the job, but I don't know. I guess I would feel more comfortable with like a Luke Maley if they can make that deal. What are your thoughts? Like who do you think is going to be the opening day catcher now?
If I had to guess right now, I'm kind of looking at Austin Wynns. I'm reading a thing right now on the blog redmachine.com that Gordon Whitmire reported that Jose Trevino left the game after getting a foul tip on his hand. This was at 5:24 today. So I would think that it's been 6 hours, and I'm sure x-rays would have came back by now. They are saying that James McCann could be available. They said the Reds reached out earlier in the offseason, and then they said that he, I guess, declined an offer, so he's available. Mm-hmm. And then Yasmani Grandal turned down an offer from the Braves, so he could be available also too. I would hope that they would at least sign one guy, because we have terrible catching depth all throughout the farm system. They drafted Logan Tanner a couple of years ago. I think in the second round. They were real high on him, and he's just never really panned out. And the only top prospect that we have right now as a catcher is Alfredo Duno, and he's at least 4 or 5 years away.
He's only 19 years old, right?
19, yeah. But he projects well. He's like a Gary Sanchez type, Salvador Perez kind of guy. If he could develop, he's a future catcher. And like I said, we're at least 4 years away, if not more. But other than that, Austin Wynns. I think his name was Barfield. And Logan Tanner was drafted 2 years ago. I think he was in single A in Dayton. And it's just, we have no depth. So I think we're going to have to sign at least somebody as a free agent to fill in.
Yeah. Hopefully we get somebody. No, not necessarily. Unfortunately, catchers are not necessarily, as valued as well. They're kind of just more known for their defense. That's why I was kind of like leaning more to a guy like Maley, who's familiar with the club at least. I don't know. A guy like Grandal, I think he would want more than just a minor league contract to be a part of this team. I don't know. He's kind of coming to the later stages of his career as well. It'll be interesting to see. I guess we're going to keep our eyes out for what Nick Kroll and Brad Meter do going forward. It's an important position because, like the familiarity with the starting pitcher is kind of paramount. I know they're not necessarily calling their own pitches anymore. It's coming from the dugout, but you still gotta stop the ball. You gotta catch the balls, and that's not an easy job.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we need at least one guy to fill in. I think that's going to do it for our bullpen talk. I feel pretty confident about our bullpen. I think this is probably the most confident I felt about our bullpen in quite some time. I think this is our best bullpen in probably at least 3 years. I think our 2022 bullpen was okay, but our team just sucked so bad. So, but 2023 was okay. I mean, there was some stretches where I think just using openers just kind of really affected things. Next episode, we're going to talk about the 26-man roster. So stick around, subscribe to Ohio Sports Talk, follow us on Twitter. It's on the bottom ticker there at Red Hot Reds Pod on Twitter, Red Hot Reds Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Follow Ohio 08 Sports Talk on YouTube. And Roger, I think this is going to do it for tonight.
All right, go Reds.
Thank you for watching the Red Hot Reds podcast, presented to you by Ohio Sports Talk.